Hello. I'm really, really happy we get to meet today. This one of my last podcasts of the year, and I guess you're also really, really busy. I've read some of your honor baths for the coming solstice and everything. Let me just pronounce your name correctly. Is it Angell?
Angel, yeah, Angel.
Angel. So almost Angel. Okay. Welcome, Angel, to this podcast series. Yeah, we might talk a little bit about wisdom today, huh?
Yes.
And we just started, and I just felt the beautiful invite to open this talk is to you were just mentioning something about listening from stillness. So let's just dive for a moment into. I always love also to listen to what wants to be said, not what have I planned. What
Mm.
do we plan to say, but what wants to be spoken in this topic, which we chose about inner leadership in the world through connection and healing and finding counsel in the unlived, in the things which speak to us constantly, but maybe we have unlearned to use our perceptual organs to really listen to the messages which await for us to be heard. And that could also be messages from our body, from the environment, and from specifically the things which are enlived, right? No, I should say enlived. Is that correct?
Yeah, the things that are intelligent, animate, alive, which from the shamanic perspective or the animist perspective is everything, not just humans.
That's right. And so why is it a problem that we listen? It's everything.
Well, I think, we live in a very noisy world, human noisy world. And I'm not just talking about the sounds of the cars and the sounds of the airplane in the sky and the sound of all our machines and technologies. Um, but also, our screen are noisy, our everything that we do as human has produced a lot of vibration and noise. And it it is becoming harder to be able to truly listen. From an ancient perspective, we're talking about listening to the whispers of our ancestors, to the wisdom of the land, to the wisdom of the trees and the plants and the rivers and the sky, all the things that we evolved with for tens of thousands of years and we lived with in more close connection because we were living closer to nature. And so we had a capacity to be able to, yeah, forecast the weather without opening an app to know what the weather is going to be tomorrow, right? To know about great changes that were happening even on the other side of the world. And that's the way we listen. Years ago, I think over 10 years ago, I spent some time on Lake Titicaca, which is this beautiful lake between Peru and Bolivia. And there are a few islands there. And I stayed with a native community for a little while. And some of the people on that island, they're a pretty small island, a few kilometers square. There were some elders there that I met that have never left this island. And there is no technology. They don't have electricity. There's no, radio or TV. And one of the elder we sat on the shore of the lake was telling me about the change that is happening on the earth with the climate. He was telling me about the conflict that are happening on the other side of the world. I can't remember where that was at the time. And I was like, asking him, how does he know about that? He said, oh, the lake told me. This sacred lake is telling us everything we need to know. And, I was started to be familiar with that kind of wisdom, with that kind of knowledge, thinking. And And it was amazing to me that he could tell me about things I knew through my devices,
Mm-hmm.
but that he was able to know about all that just by his connection to that lake that his ancestors have been sitting on for, thousands of years. And so that kind of listening that is beyond the human voices.
Mm-hmm.
And very often when we think of listening, we think through our ears, right? We think, okay, I'm hearing something. But there is a different kind of internal hearing that we have, a different kind of tool, a different kind of sense when we can know about the rest of the world, right? And it's the same sense that we witness in animals that react a few minutes before an earthquake, before anything shake, before it's not like they perceive the small vibration before anything happened, they have a sense. And we have that, we carry that. But if you live in a very loud environment for your senses, all our senses are in a very loud environment, you don't hear the little voices anymore. Your brain has a capacity to filter in order to, make us survive, because if not, we'll be overwhelmed by all what we are hearing. And when we talk about ancient wisdom, and I was a major in philosophy, so I love reflecting in knowledge from the brain and the great philosophers and intellectual. But then when I discovered and started to study with elders, I realized, there's a whole different kind of knowledge out there. There is a different university that we can go to. And it might not be a certificate like a PhD you get at the end of it, but you might get something that in fact is more relevant. My teacher often call it your second education. Say, yeah, great, I have a PhD. It's like you got your first education. Now it's time to get your second education. And that is capacity to be able to open that listening, coming from the voices that lives, in greater harmony and balance than the humans, at least humans, modern humans, as we are living today.
I'd love to get back to that in a minute, because I did read in your biography that you had something like a second awakening or a second birth, which I think you referred to. So to find out a little bit more about who have you been before and after, we'll wrap this up in a minute. But listening to you, I just had this, especially imagining this elder on the lakeside, made me feel as if we are in an exile, right? We don't really seem to have the lineages straight. I mean, what is our lineage? Not just in religion or spirituality, or even in our own families, or the village, or how would we are almost in an exile, as not knowing where to connect, because these lineages are not enlived. I mean, we know who are a family in the back lines. We might know what the place is called and what are sacred spots around. Here's very beautiful Celtic spots, but then we haven't been initiated into that land by the people who lived in it before. And here it's especially the farmers who own the land, and they use the land in a good way, but for the agriculture. So you cannot even step on their land. I have horses, so with the horses I have my pastries, and there's my places where I can at least go and rest, because the horses kind of are my lineage then to the earth and to these vibrations and to this spirit you're talking about. But most people are in exile, right? You have to pay entry to go to a lake or to sit next in a park, or
it's there was many steps for us to disconnect, and you can go from, going from a hunter-gatherer culture to a more agricultural culture. We're talking, 10, 15,000 years ago when we started to uh, look at land as private or as ownership.
Mm.
Right. So instead, one of the greatest crime in native culture, I spent a lot of time in the forest in the Amazon, and those culture are still, hunter gatherer. They do some cultivation of plants, but it's a shared resource. And the greatest crime is that if you harvest something, you're not sharing it with the tribe. It's considered stealing, even if you found it, because you didn't find it. It's everyone property.
Mm.
It's no one property. So that's considered a greater crime than anything else, than even killing. So we have, obviously privatized the land, and then colonialism happened, where we started to, Europeans especially, go all over the world and say, okay, this is ours. This is not your land anymore. We went to see people that have been living there for thousands of years and say, no, we own this land. We're going to put our flag, and we are going to take the resources, and we're going to bring it to our countries. And the resources being, things we extract from the soil, precious metal, gold, but also humans. We started to create that separation, not only between us and nature, but between each others.
Yeah.
And colonialism, didn't just steal the land. It rewrote the story of nature. It taught us to see the earth as something to dominate, not something to belong to. And so, there's a lot of talk about decolonization at the moment, but it's really a fight to unlearn this lie and rebuild our relationship with the planet. And in any relationship, like a relationship between two human beings, if you don't respect the other person in the relationship, it's going to create problems, right? And we can see today this disconnection from the greater living world, the beyond human world, is creating that problematic relationship. And, it seems that sometimes we're even doubling down on that at the moment. But ultimately, unless we remember those ancient instructions on how to live in nature and how to belong with the land instead of owning the land, it doesn't matter how much thinking we put into it, how much new technology we invent, we have cut ourselves from our rights, our birthrights. And that's very problematic. And we don't always perceive, I guess, how it's impacting us most of the time. That's also one of the things that's pretty clear to me. We don't always see how this severing of ties with the land is creating the pain that we're experiencing, and what it looks like in our world. That the pain we witness, we don't always understand it's coming from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because what do? Most people book 2 weeks or 3 weeks vacation a year, then they go and seek nature, and then they're somewhere where, again, they're most likely fenced in or paying for stand-up paddling. Now it's very fashionable here, so then they go on the lake with stand-up paddles, and they get more and more nervous or anxious or depressed, and then they come home, and it was the vacation, which was another consumption trip. And it seems, that there is this void or a hole, a lack, a real lack. People don't know what it is. At the moment, I speak a lot with female leaders, and I know you've worked on this topic also, self-leadership and leadership, people who have a high level of stress, responsibility, and also, this might be someone doing yoga or spiritual teachings, and still having spoken to them the last days in research for my book, they were surprisingly to me saying, I still haven't found a spot. For example, the yoga teacher told me this morning, I think I'm going to stop teaching yoga. And I said, why? You love it so much. But she said, but the people don't take it. They think it's a sport. They come, at 5 after work to do their workout or to have their planned 50 minutes relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
Then they pay for it and they go. And she said, I cannot witness it anymore. It makes me so sad. This is not why I became a yoga teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. There is, I study yoga. That was my first, in fact, training, I would say, non-conventional training. But when I say I study yoga, I mean, I studied the Advaita Vedanta scriptures for 10 years. My yoga teacher, she's still alive. She's 85 plus years old right now. And her yoga certification takes more than 10 years. That's the old ways where you would commit, yoga is not just the asana. When people say I'm doing yoga, they're saying I'm doing asana. I'm doing the movement, the pose.
Yeah.
But yoga is a whole philosophy of life. It doesn't happen on the mat. In fact, it happens outside of the mat. And you can't really understand yoga if you don't study the scriptures. There's literally, you don't understand it. You've taken one aspect of yoga and there is 7 or 8 of them, and you take one of them and say, okay, I'm doing yoga. I say, no, you're just doing, one thing here out of what you call yoga, but it's not yoga. And that's what put me on my spiritual path. I mean, I already was, I guess we're born on our spiritual path, right? But being interested in this ancient knowledge. And I find it a great pleasure to understand the connection between this wisdom and the asana. And then it takes a whole other level in your practice. But yeah, we are, I think an elder called it the microwave society, meaning that we won't think in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right? We put in the microwave and it's ready, right? Mm. And this knowledge, I've been studying with elders in Peru for 15 plus years. And I'm a baby, I'm a beginner, I'm a student. And when I be 75 or 80 or 90, I will be a beginner still. There is this idea in ancient wisdom that we're still very young. The people in the jungle, they call us the little brother, the white people, the little brothers, like young, very young, right? And it's the reference that we're still very new to this perspective because, we forgot about it thousands of years ago through our evolution of our culture, right? And it fascinates me when I meet elders who, don't know how to read or write, which is the case of many elders I'm studying with, but who carry so much more wisdom than any PhD person I've ever met. And they can blow their mind if you were to sit with them and listen to them. And they literally never read a book. And how is that possible? Well, it's possible because they've gone through their second education their whole life because they have broken through the lie or the belief that somehow the mind is the ultimate tool for knowledge. And that's so hard for people to accept that, to even understand what I'm talking about right now. People are like, well, you're still learning through your mind. And, it's like the mind is really resisting this idea. It doesn't want to let the grip. Right? And we made, the slave the master. Mm. And it just never worked that way for millions of years, for as long as there was humans. It never worked that way. And by the way, it still doesn't work that way for many, many people on the planet. Many people don't live that way. Most people live still in traditional culture. We even if it's less and less, there's still a lot of people that live very close to the land. I think one of the first biggest job on the planet is farming, right? It's like the main risk of people working with the land. And even if people, modern farming is a whole different animal here. But let's say most people, in India, in China, in many other places in the world still cultivate with their hands, still cultivate with spending a lot of time in connection to nature and understanding it. So that's a whole different perspective that we can get. And I don't know about the solution because, we're so far away from it. that for most people it seems almost like impossible to reclaim that loss.
Yeah. And that's so painful because it's there, right? I mean,
Yes.
like in your image, there is the mountain and you, which is beautiful, and the hawk above your head. It's there. It's there right now, and the stars are there, and the moon is here, and still it's we cannot. What happened that we cannot um, hear? It's speaking. I mean, I was saying in another podcast, you can walk with your dog in the forest and say, I'm taking the dog for a walk. Or you go in the forest with your dog, but the forest speaks to you. But to so many people, it will not speak because of the state they're in, although it is there, it wants to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for free, it's there, it's so close that even it's so close, maybe that's why people don't understand it takes that one step. But then again, what would you say? I was saying to another friend today, now it's all called forest bathing, it's called in Germany. I don't know. Yeah, so you pay this course and forest bathing. You have to learn
Yeah, I
how.
mean, obviously that comes from that craving, right? The craving is there for everyone. I think most people don't realize it. You know, I didn't realize it for many years. I mean, I realized I was suffering and I thought it was because of my job. I thought it was because of the lifestyle I had. I mean, a lot of that was some valid reasons, but the reason I was suffering is because I was disconnected from my nature.
Yeah.
We
But
don't just disconnect from nature, we disconnect from
yes,
our
your
nature,
name. Yeah.
right?
Was that a one moment where you noticed that? Was that like a thing
Well,
that
I think, you know, that's the trick about it. I think, why do people don't hear it? Why do people don't return to it? It's because, you know, we believe that's not where the wisdom is, because we've been taught since we're little, the wisdoms are in books and in human knowledge, and look at the progress of humanity and look at all the technology and, you know, and, you know, there are amazing books, by the way. I'm not saying don't read books. I love reading books, right? But I think you have to come to a point in your life, in your own suffering,
Mhm.
or the witnessing of the suffering of the world, and say, okay, this is not working. It doesn't work. It just doesn't, you know. And if you're not there yet, you're not going to look somewhere else. If you think that whatever we're witnessing now, from the environmental perspective, from the social perspective, from the political perspective, from all those perspectives, if you think, okay, yeah, this is just, you know, normal,
Mhm.
and we just have to perfect it, to tweak it, to change a little bit there and a little bit there, and we're going to get to, if you still believe that, you're going to stay in that perspective. But at least for me, and I know for many people, there is a point in your life when you start to realize maybe it is not the answer. Maybe more technology or greener technology are not going to solve the climate crisis, because it comes from a disconnection from nature.
Mhm.
It comes from resource extraction. It comes from a broken relationship with land.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter how green is your technology. It's probably better maybe for the carbon footprint, but it creates a whole other set of issues because we haven't looked at the roots of the issues. That is our relationship to the living world. And therefore, we make decisions that are human centric. It's how can we survive, right?
Mhm.
How can we weather the climate change?
Mhm. Mhm.
How can we, you know, maybe create peace on earth between two nations?
Mhm.
And I know that's important. I'm not saying that is not important, but from an ancient perspective, from an indigenous perspective, you're sitting in a circle, not just with humans, but with animals, with plants, with trees, with rivers, with mountains, with the wind. So in that circle of relation, there are many other voices. And there are processes, rituals, ceremonies, practices that have been developing over thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, on how to do that, how to listen to that, how to gather wisdom from the non-humans in order to create harmony with all there is, not just the human beings. But we're still in a very human-centric society. In fact, even a lot of people in the spirituality movement, the spiritual movements, it's very human-centric. It's about their healing of their relation. And yes, there is the trees and the plants and the earth, and we pray for the earth and all of that. But those prayers don't really work because you're sitting with you at the center, or with humans at the top of a pyramid. And there's no pyramid, it's a circle. There's literally nobody better or less, And it's very hard for human beings to humble themselves enough to recognize that the ant, the bee, the oak tree is as important as you.
Yeah.
The ant is not less important. It's not more, but it's not less. And it takes, because of our culture, because of our education, because of the veil that we carry in our mind, it takes a lot of unlearning in order to not just know that, but to experience it, to relate really that way. Where the health of your potted plant in your apartment is as important as your own health. And it's like, oh yeah, the plant is dying. It's like, oh, it's just a potted plant. No, it's you. This is you that's dying here. This is as important, not more, not less. And living, like literally in every breath, in every moment of your life, in that perspective can be very challenging too. Right? How do we do that in the modern world? So it's a process, and that's why it takes, a lifetime to remember, a lifetime to reclaim this sacred place that we belong in. But the place we have put ourselves, like gods and masters of the earth, this is not a sacred place. This is ego. This is the king that became crazy. All right. And that's not listening to anybody else anymore. But that's what we are, right? We are the crazy kings or queens, not listening to our people, meaning the beyond the human people. And it's about me. It's about my healing. It's about my practice. It's about my relaxation. It's about my forest bath. It's about me feeling better, right?
Or my enlightenment.
And it's lacking reciprocity. There is a concept in Indian cosmology. It's one of the core teachings. There are many, but it's one of them that's really key. It's sacred reciprocity. It's called Ayni, A-Y-N-I, meaning that you can't really take anything without giving as much. It's all in reciprocity. It's all in balance. And right now we are very living in imbalance with the natural world. So naturally, there's going to be a counter force that are going to bring us back to humbleness. One way or another, it's coming. It's already happening. And we either are going to realize we're not God, or we're going to be reminded.
How would that look like if I was, like a chief SEO manager in New York, running around all day? And maybe you have been one of them, I don't know.
I was, yes.
And how would it look like? How would the call feel like? Would it be maybe he looks out the window and sees a hawk flying by, and this day it's not just a hawk, but suddenly the hawk has meaning to him? Or is it, what I'm trying to say is, how can it crack open the memory of what we need to remember to find the path to walk there?
Welcome to Parallax, the resurrection of truth, beauty, and goodness. Parallax, a media war engine. Parallax, the construction amidst eternal decay. Parallax, the portal to the edge of chaos. Parallax, poem and provocation. Parallax, mad philosophers and tantric demigods. Parallax, totem for an unknown god. Parallax, philosophy and the return of the matriarch. Parallax, the end of the meaning crisis. Parallax, the whispering daemon in your ear. Parallax, the god of wisdom, wine and love. Parallax, your home for superior publications, podcasts and courses. Parallax, join us today.
I mean, I wish I had the magic answer or the magic stick, abracadabra, you know, to answer that. I would say, you know, we're coming back to the idea of suffering, right? Suffering can be a great awakening tool.
Yes.
Or it can be the opposite. If you try to numb it, run away from it, double down on it, like we're seeing today. But I think, you know, I work with a lot of people that are successful in their professional career or in their life to a certain degree, but are miserable inside. Or they might not be calling themselves miserable, but they're highly stressed, right? Mm-hmm. They don't sleep very well. They have anxiety. They take pills to wake up, pills to go to sleep. They numb their pain through alcohol and social distractions. They are constantly in that rat race of running for more until they retire, and then they think they are going to enjoy life. If a health issue doesn't stop them before that, which is often the case where people, you know, reach out because they're just having a burnout or a breakdown or an illness because their body just can't take it anymore. That's usually the one way into awakening, one way of the path, where we fall on our knees and we realize we have no control about what's happening. We literally don't control this breath, our life. We don't choose when it stays and when it goes. That's very humbling to realize that you're mortal. But I think there is also, when you really look at what brings value to your life, what are those moments that are really precious? And you might be reminded of that when you lose someone, when you just avoid dying in a car accident, you know, suddenly you're reminded that, wow, what really matters is my family, you know. It's things that I take for granted that I maybe don't see anymore. You realize you can't buy any of that. You cannot buy a beautiful sunset. You cannot buy the smile on a child, right? The connection. You cannot buy love. You can't. You cannot buy connection, authentic connection. You can't buy them. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire. In fact, a lot of billionaires are very disconnected and very alone. You cannot buy that kind of power. It's a different power than being the president of the country or the CEO of a large company. It's a very different kind of relating. And I think maybe it's as we age and as we come close to our own mortality and we experience life in a different way, we start to realize that no amount of things I can find in the store, no amount of money on my bank account, no amount of houses or nice sports car or whatever it is really filling this gap, this hole, because you've been doubling down and doubling down and doubling down, and you climb the ladder, and then you look back and like, oh my God, life was so much more simple when I was 20 or when I was a child, you know, and I miss this time. I miss those moments. So you need to come to that kind of realization between a dream you've been sold and your real dream, who you really are. And then you start, and that's what happened for me. I started to realize that this dream I was being sold, this dream I participated in, this dream I was trying to maintain and achieve and all of that, was a lie. Because it didn't bring the inner peace, freedom that I was looking for. it didn't nourish me. It didn't nourish me. It felt nice, you know. I was on TV and I was on radio and I had all those awards and I raised a lot of money for my company. That felt good. But what felt good? My ego, my mind, not my heart. And it was never enough. That was not a moment where I felt, you know, what I'm experiencing today. And I guess it's for everyone to come to that realization on their own path, in their own way. You know, many people don't come to that realization, right? I was reading an article recently that we used to die because we were old. Now we're dying because we're sick. There's more and more death now in old age, but people are not well. Yeah. I had, you know, people live really long in my family, you know, over 9,500 sometime. And I had the great pleasure, honor to know 3 of my great-grandparents when I was little. And all of them died in their sleep. 2 of them died by saying goodbye to their family in the evening, say, I'm done, you know, thank you for this beautiful life. They just knew it was coming. They gave their goodbye, they went to bed, and they didn't wake up. Talk about peace.
Yeah.
Talk about being ready and prepared. Most people are not ready, right? Yeah. Today we are, you know, trying to extend life because we don't want to die anymore, because we're terrified by it. So either it's the cosmetic industry or it's the life aging process, or, you know, we're not comfortable with it. We put our elders in homes. We put them away. We don't want to see aging. We don't want to see it on TV. We don't want to see it on our face. That's the opposite of an ancient wisdom culture, a native indigenous culture, where the elders are the center of the wisdom circles, where they are the one. In fact, you know, in Peru, very often if a kid asks their parents, like a little kid, sometimes I see that, you know, and they go to their parents because they have a question about something, the mountain, the animals, the cosmos. The parents always say, go ask your grandmother, go ask your grandfather. Even if they know, because there is that humbleness and respect towards the elders that have lived longer years studying in connection, that they will have the better answer. And so as little children, they learn that this is the most important. And what is the oldest on our planet? The mountain, the trees, the rivers, the lands. So when we need answer, we go to the elder. What technically trees are our grandmothers and grandfathers. It's not just a figure of speech. They were here before us. Somehow in the evolution, they came before us. And, you know, most of the trees on my land are older than me. You know, I have a beautiful oak tree that's probably 200 or 300 years old. And yet for the Western mind, it's very hard to accept the idea that a tree can know more than I do.
Well, it's from a different place, right? So if you, I mean, if we would give a invitation for someone listening to this to say, you know, something simple, try it out. What would be your suggestion or invitation? What could be a first encounter that at least opens the possibility of what you're saying to be happening? Not to sit there and feel even more in exile. Because now you promised the mountain will speak to me, but it's not, you know what I mean?
Well, first you have to silence your mind. You know, are you comfortable with being instead of doing? I always ask my client, how many times are you a human being during your days? And there are never a human being, there are human doings. Are you comfortable with sitting without doing anything? Not writing, not listening to music, not checking your phone, just sitting with yourself, with your breath, just being there. For most people, it's terrifying. And it is terrifying, because you know what happened when you silence yourself? You see yourself. And then you see the distortion between who you think you were or you are and who you truly are. And then there's all those little voices that you've carried for so long that you start hearing. The unprocessed grief and the unresolved relationships and the dream that you had that never happened. And it's terrifying to do that. Once you silence yourself, you'll start hearing. Right? You know, when you are, I don't know, in a very loud environment, like, I don't know, a nightclub or a place where there's a very loud speaker, and then you come out and your ears are numb, right? You're not really hearing. That's really what we are, right? We're in that constant state without realizing it. So it takes time for the nervous system to calm down. Stephen Harold Bunner, who is a writer, in one of his books, he talks about, he says, you need to wait for the doors of perception to reopen. Mm-hmm. The doors of perception in the brain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? The more you tune your brain to try to listen or pick on something, the more the brain develops that capacity. That's where do great musicians. Mm-hmm. If you study music, at the beginning, you're just hearing, you know, sound, and then you can hear the notes and the half a tone and the quarter of a tone and the eighth of a tone. What's happening in the brain? The brain is like, okay, this is important. We're going to open the doors of perception to that. The same happened with the tree. If you sit with a tree just for 1 minute and you keep checking your phone, you're not going to hear anything. But I can bet you money. I do that with my students. I do that with my clients. If I give you a practice to really sit there every day for 30 minutes, doing nothing else than sitting and looking at it, literally nothing else. And that's all we have to do. And you might get bored and your mind is going to think of what I do next and shopping and my work and my phone, and just busy with that until it calms down. But also, do you really want to hear the tree? Because if you do that once a month, do you really care? Like, if I want to know you here, I can't really get to know you in 30 minutes. But if I say, you know what, Cordula, we're going to go on a call together every day for 30 minutes for the next month, I bet you that in a month from now, we'll know each other better. I'll know more about you. You'll know more about me. So you want to develop a new kind of relationship, right? With yourself and with the world, with the tree, with the land, with your ancestors, whatever that is. How much space can you carve in your busy schedule for that relationship? It's as simple as that. There's no, people sometimes say, well, it's magic or it's crazy. Sometimes I hear it. I say, well, have you ever tried? I'm not telling you to trust me. I'm telling you to experience it directly. I never tell people what they should hear, what the land is telling me, what the land is going to tell them. But I say, try that. Dedicate maybe 10 minutes every morning to listen to the silence, but do that every day. Because if 18 hours a day you're awake and you take 1 minute, how important is that really? Is that important? 1 minute of 18 hours? Probably it's not. So it needs to come right from that deep inner place that is starving for disconnection, right? And then you have the experience that is beyond words, that is beyond anything rational you can think of. You get an advice for your life. You get an idea you never had. You get a vision. And then you realize this is the most beautiful thing, or the best advice you've ever received in your life, better than your shrink, better than any workshop you've been to, better than your best friend. And then you're like, wow. So that's where it is. So I'm going to develop that, right? But you need to have that kind of craving first, or deep pain that like, okay, I can't find solution nowhere, so I'm going to try something different. And then commitment and discipline in order to make that happen. And then you get the gift. And usually those gifts, that's how what happened for me. You know, when I got my first messages or guidance and I started applying them, my life started to change in such a beautiful way. I was like, okay,
This works.
Yeah, it works, right? It just works, right? You don't need to understand it. I think people sometimes, and that's a very Western mind thing, we need to understand it in order to trust it. People say, well, I need to know exactly what's happening. I say, do you understand electricity? What kind of? Do you know what's going on in the cable and the wire when you turn the light on? Say, well, not really. I don't know. Can you explain me what the electrons are doing? I'm a scientist. I can't explain you, but can you explain? It's like, no. And saying, yeah, it works, right? You turn on the light, it turns on. You don't need to understand what's going on for that to happen. What I'm telling you is that if you turn that button, if you press it, the light turn on. If I tell you, go sit in silence every day with yourself for 30 minutes for the next 30 days and something will happen, try it. And then come back to see me, right? I think the Buddha said that, or at least we said the Buddha said something like, don't trust me. Experience it for yourself, right? Practice and then trust your experience, trust what's coming out of that. Right? It's the same as indigenous knowledge. Indigenous knowledge is not a Bible. It's not a sacred text that says, you have to do this. No, it says, here's the possibility of life. It is a different way to relate. It's not to be saved. It's not to be immortal. Maybe it's to be wiser, but they don't even say that. I'm not sure it's about that anyway. But there is a way to relate to yourself and to life and to others that might emerge and make you feel finally at peace and at rest, finally nourished, like your heart is going to feel so nourished. Are you hungry for that or not? I'm starving for it. That's my meal every day, right?
Oh, that's beautifully said. How about saying a few words at the very end of our time now about what how you're gonna do this solstice ceremony or day? Maybe I could add an invitation if there's still places available, or maybe if you would just like to share, because it is Christmas time and everyone is lonely, it's dark, everything is with lights, artificial lights, so we're in the typical zombie mode, right? Everyone's getting really busy. Everyone is forgetting what it is about. All I know is it's so dark outside, and I'm so much looking forward for the renewal of light coming. What have you got planned for solstice?
Well, it's the most sacred time in the calendar of nature. So in Peru, the winter solstice happened on June 21st, right? It's South Hemisphere. So here we're Northern Hemisphere. So it happens, around December 21st, 2021. That's the whole celebration of Yule. It's in fact, most people in Europe celebrated that for thousands of years before Christianity and before we celebrated Christmas, the return of the light of the Christ on the 24th, 25th of December. It's kind of off, because the light has returned like around the 20th, I think. That's another disconnection, by the way. Our calendars are misaligned with nature, and some people saying it was done on purpose. I do believe too, but it doesn't really matter. It's definitely not aligned. On the solstice night is the time when the sun died and is reborn. So on the 20th at night, on the evening, the sun is going to die. It's an elder right now. That's why it's cold. That's why it's dark. And then it's reborn on the 21st as a baby. So it's still very young. It's still not bright. But then it's going to get brighter and brighter and brighter, right? So this is a celebration of death and rebirth. And this is the moment where we have the opportunity to see the deepest into the darkness, because it's the darkest. So we can listen really easily. When things are very bright, it's very hard to see. But when you have only darkness and you just see a tiny bit of light, you can see details that you can't see. So on that ceremony night, we are going to use a few practices, breath work, to tap into our inner landscape, our subconscious, the unseen part of the self. Well, I'm going to use rune reading, and runes are an ancient North shamanic tradition, comes from Northern Europe, for divination and exploring what the message do we want to know. Very often in those ceremonies, it's not us thinking, okay, we should do that. We're asking spirits, the ancestors and the land, what are the message that our people, that we should hear in this moment? What message do you have for us? And we create a container, a sacred practice that allow everyone, beginners or advanced, to hear specific messages for themselves. We're not like, here is a message for everyone on the circle tonight. No, everyone is going to hear their own wisdom. And we will also share a story about the origin of this festival, this big celebration of Yule, and the Christmas tree and Santa Claus, and where does it really come from? Because, it's kind of a little bit far away from the original tradition, but there's a beautiful, very ancient stories that explain why we decorate a tree. Why is it a pine tree? Why do we put lights? Why do we put those round red balls on it? Why does Santa is dressed in red? Why is there Rudolph or reindeer? Why is there a flying chariot? So all of that, has roots in ancient stories, ancient traditions. And I personally believe, when I learned that story for the first time, it's probably a decade ago, I found the story much more beautiful than the Christmas story, right? Mm-hmm. And it made me understand why I enjoy Christmas so much this time of the year. It reconnected me to something that it's not something that I learned from my parents or my culture. It reconnected me to ancient roots, something that is craving in me for meaning, for wisdom. And then it makes the whole, celebration, because it's really a time of celebration, much more rich, nourishing.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The gift, really the gift of that time are not the gift you find under the Christmas tree. There's other kind of gift you can harvest. Now we put, we buy stuff and we put it there, and then we, those gifts, a few months later, they end up in landfill, or a few years later in the attics. The gift you receive when you do this kind of ceremony, you keep them for life. They are not going to go away. And there are gifts that keep giving, in the sense that not only they're giving you, but they're going to give to your children, to people around you, because they grow. Those gifts are like seeds. So it's a different experience. And I think, from what I see, because more and more people are interested in this way, I think everybody wants that. Everybody is craving for that. And that's good. That's good. It's good to be thirsty and hungry for knowledge, for that ancient wisdom. It's a time, Grandmother Sri Crow is one of my teachers, and she said, we're in the time of prophecy. There are stories, our people have stories that we've carried for thousands of years that talks about this time we're in. Mm-hmm. It talks about the dying river. It talks about the animal. It talks about the people fighting. And the story tells us what's going to happen. And so we are privileged to be born in this time we're in, to be alive. But also, every privilege in ancient cosmology comes with great responsibility. Great responsibility. And I think we have forgotten that. We're very privileged with our modernity, the world we're living in, the abundance. I mean, not everybody lives in abundance, by the way. So we might be way more privileged than most people, right? But therefore, it comes with great responsibility. That's the reciprocity I was talking about earlier. If I receive so much, I have to give more. I have to give more. Right? And how do I do that? Why am I here? What is God, my ancestor, spirit, my heart is asking me to do? That's for, each and every one of us to really ponder the question and answer it one way or another,
There's a beautiful ending word. I think we leave it here. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
in that manner, I wish you and everyone who hears this a beautiful new way of understanding solstice and this time coming, and using it to really listen, and using it to really give and really share and interconnect. And I don't know, maybe if it's just even the difference of light on the 22nd in the morning, or something in the sky in the 21st or the 20th, that we turn receptive for, and then remember your beautiful words, that this is what we're hungry for, this is what we're searching and not knowing how to grasp and grab it. And then remember that there's so many people on this planet who know the way, and they're not here in the city mainly, but they are also, but there are these keepers of wisdom and protectors of knowledge, as you said, people and non-people, humans and non-humans. For me, in that sense, this is the last podcast of the year, and I just hope that everyone who's out there, who feels alone, who feels separated, who feels in exile, is reminded that if you feel that, you're on the right path, because we are, and it's time to go home. Thank you so much, Angell. I'll stop the recording here for the moment.